Hello, here today with a bit of a follow-up on our previous Midway commentary. Now, of course, after covering the buffed Midway, it's only natural that we cover the Saipan. Now, nothing in the Saipan has changed, per se, but nevertheless, she does retain her relatively superior loadouts, and given she uses the same aircraft as the Midway, it's nice to take a look and see how the Midway's aircraft perform when you chuck them onto a platform that sees matchmaking up to 2 tiers lower, as in this case. Today we're on the map North, the mode is Domination, and we're in tier 6 to 8 matchmaking, so we are top tier. One destroyer per side against an enemy Lexington. Couple of battleships, of which the only ones of note are really the Massachusetts in terms of AA. Destroyer-wise, a couple of Italians, so really nothing. Or sorry, cruiser-wise, a couple of Italians, so really nothing. And then a Vanklin as their only GD, so this game will be pretty interesting. I know the destroyer spawned middle, and I know he doesn't have access to a smokescreen, so I will probably make a significant concerted effort to bully him. Now, starting off the match, launching my F8F Bearcats. These are, of course, the tier 10 aircraft that you're familiar with from the Midway. However, you get a 2x3 setup, so only 2 aircraft per strike wave, so you're only launching 6 rockets per wave. As a result, you have quite a bit lower munitions density. We do find the Vanklin. As predicted. See if he proceeded straight. Nope, he's diving in slightly toward the cap. Start off with a nice raking 4 rocket strike with 2 fires inside the Amalfi's AA, but remember the Amalfi has basically what amounts to a personal AA protection bubble, so it's unsuited for the duties of air escort. Set another fire, another 4 rockets. He's missing 10,000 health now, and he has a permanent fire ticking. With that done, gonna relaunch. Could use the Bearcats again just for speed, but he's lit up already and at half, so obviously he's quite heftily damaged already. He's still ticking, and my teammates are still hammering him because he's lit up. His aggressive initial positioning means that he is going to take a bit of damage. He's trying to run down my Shiratsu, so I'm gonna go support him. Enemy Lexington was scouting, but he might have gotten the memo now that perhaps he should give his only destroyer a bit of a hand. He touches the cap. Not the wisest thing to do, considering he's a Saipan in this match, my friend. No hits, only defended ribbons, but me just lighting him up for my teammates will be enough to cause crippling damage. He's making a run for the Shiratsu's smoke, but if he does do so, it does mean he's going to sail pretty much straight, so you want the smoke or you want a beach? Again, slightly off to the side. Meanwhile, my Garage Spade does get himself dev struck. It's on the edge of the cap. Oh, I misanticipated where he's going. This time I'm probably going to hit him though. Another 4,000. And he's lit up by my fighter. Following up the Bearcats just in case, so I have to do it myself. My North Carolina did squeeze a shot off, so we'll see. He's burning, and someone takes him out. Nice. Well, we already have the Bearcats here, so let's start a fire onto this Bismarck. Looks like I'm playing around this side. Massachusetts on his side is executing his bush. Massachusetts, of course, is pretty overpowered for tier 8. Lazo torpedoes a Gorizia. Now Lazo is a Russian, or Soviet, light cruiser at tier 7, which means he only has access to Soviet self-defense torpedoes, which is why I'm surprised. Soviet self-defense torpedoes are not something you see getting kills every day. Why the Gorizia is going close quarters versus that kind of matchup in the first place, I can't tell you. Those guys just backing up. These guys pretty concentrated. My team at C is basically suiciding, so gonna have to make sure we get into A. Because we do need some kind of advantage. Meanwhile, gonna keep working on that Bismarck. Lexington currently flying over there, so no need to provide air cover. He's relaunching torpedo bombers from my Bayern, but those guys are already condemned to death based on their positioning. They should be running from that cap. The same way I have. Bringing in that narrow spread Saipan torpedo bomber into the mix. Now you'll note my torpedo bombers are exactly the same BTD as the Midway. However, unlike the Midway's now buffed 5,000 damage torpedo, mine hit for 6,400, a full 1,400 more per torpedo, and that means of course a full, was it like 5,600 damage per pass? So I'm basically launching 4 torpedoes that hit for more than the power of 5 all at once. I'm gonna continue to push forward. We're gonna eliminate the 2 battleships here. On the other side, they've eliminated my squad, but we are up a cap and up a ship still. We're gonna lose at Ismail quite swiftly, so we'll be even on caps and up a ship. Arizona and Vladivostok here. So Vladivostok fairly weak tier 8 AA ship. It has good range on the guns, but the guns themselves are kind of weak, so as a result, it does struggle with aircraft. These are of course the same bombs and bombers, again the BTD, carrying the Midway's HEDB. So unlike the Lexington's 9,700 HE alpha bomb, the BTD carries a 11,000 HE alpha bomb, which obviously inflicts quite a bit more damage. Lexi launches his fighter, but that's fine. Just swoop over onto the Arizona in the meantime then. He's moving toward me at a slow pace. Fairly small American standards, so since I'm dropping from such great height, I'm gonna just ditch early. Double fire on him. I can either kill the Vladivostok myself, or I can just fly around and hit the Arizona. Lexington also pushing in with his teammates. My Ismail still remains stubbornly alive. Looks like Ismail's gonna be fine to be dispatched by my allies. My Shiratsu really should be expending his smoke elsewhere. There's a carrier in the game, so probably just wanted to like fly to move past him instead of shooting him, but fine. If you want to shoot that tier 8, go ahead. Staying well away from the Lexington for now. His fighter fades, but he has 6 km AA. He's healing. And he dies. Finally, we get access to our target. The Arizona. Nice, easy game. He did double fire earlier when we hit him with those bombs, remember? So he's used his damn gun. I'm gonna go ahead, launch with those 40 knot torpedoes. Only gonna hit 2, looks like, based on the spread, maybe just even 1. Looks like just 1, so a bit of a misaim on my part. Pop the heel just to preserve the numbers. Arizona has pretty bad AA, obviously, as a tier 6 American standard from before the war, but doesn't mean he can't shoot down planes eventually. He's very slow, so I don't have to lead that much. However, he's so small that it's actually difficult for me to get good hits onto him. Circling in a fairly tight circle. Oh, my team does dispatch one of the Massachusetts, or the Massachusetts rather, which is obviously excellent. Relaunching, need that Amalfi to separate away from the pack though. Gorizia chasing my Gorizia. He does win the Gorizia duel, so I'll deal with him uh, shortly. Probably with rocket planes, and that's going to prompt me to move slightly north. Lexington continues to move away. Italians have 4.6 kilometer AA. I want him to turn all the way out. But if he continues just turning into my allies, that's perfectly fine as well. Looks like he is doing the turn out as predicted. I'm gonna circle. And now I'm gonna swoop up behind him, assuming he survives any of this. He smokes, but I can predict his path using the minimap. And you can see me there, just catching him off blind fairly easily. Diving into an AA cluster here, so I don't expect these planes to survive. Tier 6 aircraft, or AA, but the carrier is here, and the Lexington has very potent self-defense air defense. At this point, the game conclusion is elementary. They're all pinned down. And I can move outward. Did manage to score one bomb hit onto the New Mexico, but because he was so close to the air defenses of the Lexington, it did trim quite a few of my planes. The damage controlled my fire, which is annoying. But you do what you gotta do. At this point, gonna engine cooling because the game's pretty much over. Leaning quite heavily on my torpedo bombers when possible. If you'll remember, this is basically the same torpedo as a Lexington's torpedo bomber squadron, except I'm launching one extra torpedo per wave with the Midway's strike pattern. Now the Midway strike pattern is not great. It's quite wide, as you can see. Sorry, dodging flak. Which does result in some difficulty hitting smaller, lower tier targets, such as this New Mexico. However, it does allow you to do some pretty neat stuff like that, if you can get the reticle to tighten quickly enough. Only 2 hits there, but I do break his rudder, and my teammates will finish him off. You can see my Baltimore hull allowing me to quickly traverse what's left of the map. Gonna pre-drop once because I'm attacking a carrier. Carrier self-defense aircraft will always trim a wave at the very least. And that combined with the carrier's own self-defense AA means that attacking a carrier is extremely costly, and for a carrier like the Saipan, with her tiny squadrons, this can pose a bit of a problem. You don't want to attrition any planes. So, Lexington's turning in toward the rock, so we're going to abandon our initial approach and turn outward. We're going to go over the mountain over here. You want to be creative with your Saipan aircraft. Each of them are extremely expensive, you could say. So as a result, you want to hold on to them where possible. So using this mountain to provide cover, but remember my aircraft don't have the best turning circle. So instead of going right over the mountain and approaching from there, fighter locks pretty fast. Do still get 2 bombs off. 2 hits slam in. He's pretty close to the Huanghe now, so he's likely to get torpedoed. The Lexington cannot slow itself down very quickly, even if he brought his carrier to a full stop. So he needs to eliminate my Huanghe. I was going to drop him a fighter, but I didn't have fighters on the dive bomber squadron. Again, going with 6 aircraft versus the carrier is expensive, but he is the last target. At this point, he's going to take all 3 Huanghei torpedoes. I can't see a world where a Lexington doesn't, and he does in fact take them and get taken down. So, nothing much to see here, just a very relaxing, top-tier game in the Saipan on patch 8.11. Saipan continues, of course, to be a delicate weapon system. Even when you're top tier, you do still want to pre-drop. As World of Warships kicks me out of my lobby. Thanks a lot. It's a new week, so new directives, so you'll see a whole bunch of missions. Anyhow, 118,000 damage. 10 torpedo hits, 14 bomb hits, 11 incaps, 2 actual kills, 9 fires, 3 floods, 4 defender ribbons, 7 spotting ribbons, 13 rocket strikes, and 4 planes interdicted by fighter. Team score wise, second from the top at 1700. Remember, I am top tier. If you look at the detailed report, you'll see I got that blind hit on the Italian bomber, or Italian ship, just by blind hitting him in the smoke, if you remember. Most of the HP on the Van Klin. When you're a single DD up against a top tier carrier, you might want to play a little more cautiously than that guy. That guy definitely, as one of my colleagues will put nicely, caught to death, thanks to his reckless decision to charge on ahead. But anyhow, I'm going to re-queue just with the Saipan. See if we can get into a bottom tier match to show you just what I mean by playing cautiously. Now, because this wasn't my first review of the Saipan, I did not go over any of her particular specific characterizations, but do note that she has tiny reserves, especially compared to her counterpart like Enterprise, which is kind of the opposite concept to Enterprise. So Enterprise is a full-fledged fleet carrier, Saipan is a bit more of a light carrier. So Enterprise carries tier 7 aircraft in large squadrons that regenerate quickly, whereas Saipan carries tier 10 squadrons in tiny squadrons that regenerate very slowly. So as a result, in an extended battle of attrition, the Enterprise quite clearly has the upper hand. They're middle tier in this tier 7 to 9 match. Battleship wise, avoid the Iowa, and then cruiser wise, avoid the Buffalo, and then destroyer wise, avoid the Friesland, although Friesland is tricky to work around. Friesland, of course, is obviously quite a potent anti-aircraft destroyer, capable of even challenging but not handling a tier 10 carrier. Now I have tier 10 aircraft, but I'm missing the tier 10 module, so my aircraft are just about 7.5% less tanky than tier 10 aircraft equivalents. So I do have to be a bit careful around the Friesland, who can stealth AA. 4 destroyer game, however, means that there's plenty of other targets, such as that Mogador, another Frenchie, or ships like this Nagado, who I can pick on, because he's bottom tier spawned on the very border. Really hate it when World of Warships does that. He's beside a Buffalo, so we're gonna hit him and then quickly peel off toward the right. You can see the tiny Tim reticle does get quite narrow, skimming him for 3 rockets. Not bothering to necessarily look only for destroyers here. We set a fire. Buffalo launches a fighter? The Buffalo launches a fighter, which is odd to say the least. Because the fighter plane goes in the same slot as radar. So he doesn't have a radar. My Fletcher looks like he's gonna get harassed, so I'm gonna try and protect my Fletcher there. He's getting harassed by Enterprise rockets, which never end, because it's a huge squadron of 12 Enterprise rockets compared to my 6. Now they do launch the Havars, the anti-light ship target, so they're perfect at harassing destroyers, and more importantly, since there's 12 planes in the squadron, it's a 3x4 squadron, he basically just gets to harass a destroyer over and over for up to 3 times. Oh, Friesland pops up. That's going to prompt a heal immediately and a disengagement from me. I do give my Fletcher some warning at the very least. Looks like he did pop his defensive fire. I forced the smoke in the middle of an awkward position, however, at the very least, so not all is lost. I'm gonna try and help out, actually. Let's see if this guy's running his hydro. Does look like it, based on the fact that he's spotting out the Fletcher. Gonna aim at his last known position. Gonna be an expensive hit no matter what. Lonely Atlanta on the edge of the Friesland's AA range. I did try to blind warp him, but remember, he did 100% have his hydro running, so he'll see them coming. So it's unlikely to have any results. It did cost us 2 of our torpedo bombers. But the Friesland now controls a commanding position in the center, which is difficult for me to contest, at best. But he did interrupt my torpedo bomber strike, so as a result, he dispatches my Fletcher. So he traded a Mogador for a Fletcher on the opposite sides of the map. Torpedo bombers don't make much sense to go after the Enterprise here, so he's going after the Gorizia, or it doesn't make much sense to go after the Kagero with those. There's an Atlanta behind that rock, but he's shielding most of his AA due to the fact that he's just hiding there. Launch a bit early for the Mahan. As you can see, I'm going to time out the attack, unfortunately. Gonna plunge through into the Atlanta's AA. Now the Atlanta, unlike the Flint, doesn't have as many 40mm bofers. She's in her early war configuration, so her AA doesn't actually hurt that much, but as you can see, she's still doing a decent job in trimming down my aircraft. And she detonates. That does happen. Especially with these heavy high explosive bombs. Gonna see if I can't hit the last known position. Should be right about over it. No dice. Friesen continuing along the border. Hopefully he separates from the Akazuki. Gonna make a swift strike onto him with my rocket planes. Don't anticipate I'm gonna be able to hit him twice. But I do want to help my Bliskavika. He's exchanging blows. Not paying attention, maybe he won't pop defensive fire. Pop my engine cooling. Want to make sure we finalize this kill. Bringing 4 aircraft to make sure I have a good chance in making this strike. He's a fairly large destroyer. Unfortunately, only land 1 rocket. So we'll follow up. Okazuki still trading with the Bliska. Friesen smokes. My Bliskavika is blind. Akazuki unfortunately spotting out the aircraft for the defensive fire of the Friesen, so all I'll be able to do is make an attack and duck outward. You can see the Tiny Tims spraying but missing. Duck out and away. Should probably move my hull now, because those guys are going to threaten me. I have a slight ship lead, but we are down on destroyers. There's a Nelson in a relatively vulnerable position, but his access to him is blocked off. You can see there that those 2 attacks on the Friesen very costly to my Bearcats. They regen in 111 seconds each, so I'm basically not going to have a full squadron of rocket planes again until the end of the match. So Friesen challenging the cap. Gonna see if I can make an attack on the Gorizia. Just smoke. I guess we'll attack the Iowa then. Briefly touch the Akazuki AA bubble. I want to see which way he turns. Looks like he's turning in to face my allies. Oh no, he's turning out, I think. It's hard for me to judge. I don't get a periscope, remember, as a carrier pilot. He launches a fighter. That prompts a pre-drop from me. Now I can only at most lose 2 extra aircraft, and I expect to lose 1 on the way in. I had a full squadron of Saipan torpedo bombers, remember? So I can afford to lose some of these. I continue to move along, and I detonated someone else. Interesting. Launching HEDB is going to look for the Friesland, so this is a fairly risky maneuver. My Seattle does radar for me. Or, well, for himself, really, but hopefully he kills the Friesland first. If not, I will deal with him. Seattle detonates in Akazuki, making that the 3rd detonation on their team this match. Enterprise working his damnedest to try and hunt down my teammates, but he can't quite keep up with my detonation fiesta. My 2 kills thus far are from detonations, which, while amusing, is also kind of sad. But it does go to show, torpedoes and high explosive bombs do have a lot of reach when it comes to detonating your opponents. Taking a nice sliding attack here. Gonna take that KS, thank you very much. Recall those. Looking for a fast squadron strike onto a large target, the Nagano. So I'm gonna take the torpedo bombers. Not doing as hot in terms of damage this time. Just bumping into that Friesland you saw put a huge speed bump in terms of our damage farming potential. He's with a Buffalo, but I have a heal ready to force through. Now the heal, just like all, is just a standard heal. No gimmicks in particular with the consumables on any particular premium or tech tree aircraft carrier so far. Was gonna hit the Nagano, but the Buffalo is presenting a nice, easy broadside. Pop my engine cooling consumable to make sure I go in at full speed. Always go in at full tilt. Pop your heal. Make sure you get a value out of it. He pops his fighter plane. You can see me with that long straight run up time, getting a nice easy 20,000 alpha strike. He pops his fighter, so I'm going to leave him for my allies. Leave his AA aura. Nagano pops his own fighter. That's fine, as I mentioned earlier with the same play when the Iowa. I will just let him have these fighters. Or let him have one of my bombers. It's at a stage in the game where it's more important to remove the fighters so I can have an uninterrupted strike. It's not certain that all my aircraft would survive the strike anyway. 40 knot torpedoes. Coming in nice and straight since I had that long run up time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Easily catching our damage total up there with those 2 perfect Saipan torpedo strikes. As I mentioned, every time you land 4 Saipan torpedoes, it's like landing 5.2-ish midway torpedoes. These torpedoes are an extremely devastating weapon system, by far the most potent alpha weapon. The HE dive bombers themselves are also quite potent, but less reliable than the midways by a fair bit because you have the same size reticle in terms of aiming, but you're dropping only 66% of the munitions, 4 bombs rather than 6. Both the ships over there are quite low. Brought an alpha weapon, probably should have brought my rockets considering how bloody low they are. Seattle's going to kill the Enterprise first, 100%, so I'm going to go for the Nagano. There's less ships shooting at him. For now. And my teammates do clean up a match. But interestingly enough, you did get to see the effects of just that one particularly difficult to deal with AA ship. Any high tier AA ships like this, so a Grozavoy, for example, could have done something quite similar, but would have been even more frustrating because he has access to a heal in addition to his good AA and defensive fire. But anyhow, managed to clutch out a victory, 2 devastating strikes helping us along in that regard. So 107,000 damage, 10 torpedo hits, 4 bomb hits, 4 incaps, 3 kills, 4 fires, 3 floods, 7 spotting ribbons, and 5 rocket target hits. You can see there some of the times I made dives onto destroyers. I did miss thanks to the rocket loader. 1700 experience again, missing out on the 2000 mark in spite of not being top tier this time, mainly because, as I said, my efforts spent on the Friesland did take time away from actually inflicting damage. It wasn't until the end of the match that we caught up. However, if we go to the damage distribution, let's ignore some of this since this is detonation damage, but take away the 45,000 and just look at the 10 torpedo hits. So 10 torpedo hits should hit for about 6,400 pre-mitigation. Mitigation on battleships and cruisers that this tier averages to about 10 to 20%. So let's take 20% off the 64,000 that we should have. So we should have dealt around 52,000 in torpedoes, so still by far most damage would have been inflicted by torpedoes. Some of our bomb damage indeed is also kind of cheaty faced because we did detonate the Atlanta with those HEDBs, if you'll recall. But yeah, this distribution is a little unusual, very, very skewed toward torpedoes thanks to that full-on detonation in spite of the relatively low hits overall. This is a trend you'll see with the Saipan just because she doesn't launch that many munitions. You won't have that many hits, so you have to make sure with the Saipan that you land everything, because each aircraft is extremely precious, and each munition dropped by them is therefore extremely precious. If you look at the Saipan here, she's a cruiser hull, a Baltimore hull with a flight deck strapped on top, more or less. Very small air group, same aircraft as the fully upgraded Midway. But the key feature of the aircraft, of course, is long regen time. Rocket planes, as I mentioned, 111-second restoration time after that second strike onto the Friesland. It was, what, 12 minutes left in the match? Or 12 minutes into the match? That's not how game timer works. So 8 minutes into the match, 12 minutes left in the match. Left me with 2 out of 11 aircraft, so I wouldn't have been able to field a full squadron again until 4 minutes were left in the match. We didn't even get down to that time, so as a result, as you saw at the end of the match, I only had 4 out of 6 or 5 out of 6 Bearcats ready. And the same story is true of the torpedo bombers and dive bombers. So even though I made several attacks where I said that I wasn't going to be getting those torpedo bombers back, they were expensive. You can see here, aircraft restoration time of torpedo bombers, 135 seconds. This is your best aircraft. So every time you lose one, it's going to take more than 2 minutes to restore one. So definitely use with caution. And dive bombs much the same, 128 seconds. So as a result of these long restoration times, the Saipan does benefit extremely hard from any plane regen time buffs, because it's 5% for example, whereas if it was on a different carrier, it might only shave off a couple of seconds. When you take that 135 second regen time on the Saipan, it shaves off like almost 6 or 7 seconds per aircraft almost. But more importantly, the +2 deck space aircraft takes you from 999 base squadrons to 1111 base squadrons. And if you consider how few aircraft the Saipan has in the first place, it's a huge jump. Other module-wise, first 2 slots take your aircraft modules, the only 2 aircraft carrier modules, of course. And then I prefer TBM1 for various reasons I've issued over and over. Allows you to arm your attack nice and early outside of AA and get those nice, straight, parallel torpedo bomber attacks you want to make your best squadron have the most accurate attacks possible. And then, of course, because torpedo bombers are bread and butter, you can upgrade the HP on the torpedo bombers. Now, you can argue that the torpedo bombers have quite a bit of health already, because they have access to that heal that allows you to kind of push through damage, so you can actually take Bomber's modification too. I think that's a fairly valid choice as well, if you would like. Captain-wise, I'm just using my Midway Captain. Very simple. So base 9 points, including the upgraded survivability expert from Ovechkin. Then plane speed, concealment expert, Demolition Expert, and Last Gasp. Demolition Expert is the most optional. If you would like not to take Demolition Expert, you can instead opt for something like, the 2 1-pointers plus Priority Target, I guess. But since you have 2 HE squadrons, Demo Expert tends to be quite good here. Concealment Expert is more of a luxury than a necessity on the Saipan. As I mentioned, she has a Baltimore hull, so even without taking Concealment module, you can see that I have 10.7 Concealment. So without Concealment Expert, if I were to take Sight Stabilization or something, for example, she would have this. So this is 0.9. So if this is 0.9, so she has roughly 12 kilometer flat base detection, which is actually very good. It's the same concealment as several carriers fully upgraded, and is beaten at this tier only by, I think, Shokaku and Kaga. So my Kaga uses my Hakuryu captain, so she goes down to 9.9, I know this for sure. It says 11 right now, but that's because my captain's not mounted, so if I just throw on my Hakuryu captain, you'll see that the concealment goes down to 9.9. Shokaku, the other stealthy carrier, is 10.8. So this is with identical setup as the Saipan. So I have the plane regen module on the hull, but concealment on my captain. So she slightly, just barely beats out the Shokaku. So overall, very stealthy hull. The other key points about the hull: 33 knots, Baltimore. Baltimore speed, of course, 920-meter turning circle. Well, it's carrier turning circle, so you can't help that. But her AA is a bit weaker than other carriers. Note she does not have a long-range AA aura. She does have excellent twin Bofors and quad Bofors mounts for her mid-range aura, so it does do a good amount of damage, but it only engages targets at 3.5 kilometers, which means the planes will basically be on top of you. So for the upcoming 1 versus 1 tier 8 ranked sprint, for example, if you decide to try to bring Saipan, do note that you'll be extremely vulnerable to being dev struck by other carriers, because you have that short range AA and your hull is not exactly durable. 4% torpedo protection thanks to, again, being based off that cruiser hull, and only 51,000 health. Whereas if I compare to something bulky like the Kaga, a more dedicated carrier at the tier, if I can find it, where is my Kaga? Kaga has quite a bit more bulk, 6,000 more bulk, and an actual torpedo bulge of 22%. Shokaku, much the same story, 54,000, slightly bulkier, but a real torpedo bulge, unlike you. Lexington more similar to the Kaga, as you can see, 60,000 health. Quite the Goliath at tier 8, and 16%. And last but not least, that I can show you, the Graf Spee, or Graf Zeppelin, also has a very cruisery hull, but again has real torpedo protection, unlike your 4% at 16%. So don't make the mistake of getting into a carrier fight. And then Implac also as well, very impressive torpedo bulge of 34%, beating out all the rest of her peers that I've sampled, and a respectable 55,000 health. And she has that armored flight deck strip here, of course, which can actually resist your high explosive bombs. So if you face an implacable, of course, your HE bombs and rockets only have 60-something millimeters of penetration, I said bombs and rockets, so respectively 63 and 67. So hit the fore and aft ends of the deck. Anyhow, that wraps up our brief Saipan re-review for Anniversary Patch, following up to my midway commentary. 2 quick games showing off the impressive but very, very fragile squadrons of the Saipan. Fragile not because the aircraft are fragile, but because every time you lose one, they really, really don't come back. So definitely a carrier for the experienced, and not something an inexperienced player should take on. That'll be all for now. I'll catch you all later. And I hope you're enjoying your holidays and winter season. If you're not having holidays, just winter season, I suppose. Cheers!